The bell above the door of Joe's Minimart jingled so softly I almost missed it over the hum of the slushy machine. I was wiping down the counter for the third time that night, my eyes glued to the security camera feed in the corner. Old habit, one I'd picked up after 10 years of looking over my shoulder. The clock on the wall ticked to 11:47 p.m., and I was already daydreaming about kicking off my scuffed sneakers and collapsing onto my couch with a microwave burrito, a pack of Marlboro Reds. Please, my hand froze mid-wipe. That voice, it was deeper than I remembered, roughened like sandpaper over wood, but there was a lilt to it, high on the second syllable of please, that sent a jolt straight to my gut. I didn't look up, not right away. I stared at the smudge on the counter, trying to convince myself it was just some guy with a similar accent, some random stranger passing through our crummy little town of Millfield, Ohio. When I finally lifted my head, my throat went dry. It was him, Ethan Voss. 10 years had chiseled his jawline sharper, added a faint scar that cut from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, and turned his once bright brown hair streaked with premature gray, but those eyes, dark, intense, like they could see right through the lies I'd been telling myself for a decade, were the same. He was leaning against the counter, his posture relaxed, but his fingers tapped once, twice, on the formica, a nervous tic he'd had since we were kids. I reached for the cigarettes on the shelf behind me, my hand shaking so bad I knocked over a pack of gum. I managed to croak out, even though I knew he was 32 now, even though I'd celebrated his 18th birthday with him in his mom's basement, eating pizza and drinking stolen beer. Ethan huffed a laugh, low and bitter. You gonna act like you don't know who I am, Lila? He didn't reach for a wallet, he just stared at me, those eyes burning into mine, after everything we went through. My face heated up, I grabbed the gum off the floor and slammed it back on the shelf. This is a convenience store, not a reunion. Or I can't sell you these. I kept my voice steady, but my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The security camera beeped softly, a reminder that I was being recorded, like I needed one. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way the cops had cuffed Ethan that night, the way he'd looked at me over his shoulder, no anger, just confusion. Ethan pushed off the counter and took a step closer. I could smell him, cigarette smoke and rain and something earthy, like he'd been sleeping outside. You heard about the breakout at Mansfield, right? He said, his voice dropping so low only I could hear it. 3 guys got out 2 nights ago, they're all over the news. Ice flooded my veins. I'd seen the headlines, sure, Mansfield correctional breakout. Authorities on high alert, but I'd refused to let myself think about who might be among them. I'd buried Ethan Voss deep, under a pile of bad dates and dead-end jobs and a vow never to get tangled up in anything that made me feel as alive, and as destroyed, as he had. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, backing away until my shoulder hit the slushy machine. It gurgled, like it was laughing at me. Get out, I'll call the cops. Ethan didn't move, he just watched me, his expression softening. You think I'd hurt you, Lila? He asked. After all these years, I thought about the night I called 911. I thought about the way he'd been loading duffel bags into his truck, the way he'd frozen when he saw me, the way he hadn't even tried to run when the sirens wailed. I thought about the trial, where he'd refused to testify against me, where he'd taken a 10-year sentence without a fight. I don't know what you want, I whispered. He reached into his pocket, and for a second, I thought he was grabbing a gun. My hands flew to my mouth, but he pulled out a crumpled photo, our senior prom photo, me in a terrible pink dress, him in a rented tux, his tie askew. He'd kept it, after everything. I came to say something, he said, sliding the photo across the counter. Something I should have said 10 years ago. He paused, and for a moment, he looked like the 22-year-old boy I'd fallen in love with. The one who'd carried me home when I sprained my ankle hiking, the one who'd written me poems on napkins from the diner where we worked. The bell jingled again, and a truck driver walked in, grumbling about needing coffee. Ethan stepped back, his hand brushing mine as he grabbed the cigarettes. His skin was cold. I'll be in touch, he said, and then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. I stared at the photo on the counter, at the way we'd been smiling like we had the rest of our lives ahead of us. The truck driver cleared his throat. I jumped, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Sorry, I said, grabbing a coffee cup. Regular. He nodded, eyeing me like I was crazy. I handed him the coffee, and when he left, I picked up the photo. On the back, in Ethan's messy handwriting, was a single word: thanks. I stood there for a long time, staring at that word. Thanks for what? Thanks for turning him in. Thanks for ruining both our lives. The slushy machine hummed, the clock ticked, and outside, the rain started to fall. Just like it had 10 years ago, the night I made the call that changed everything. I locked up Joe's Minimart 10 minutes early, my hands still shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The rain was coming down hard now, drumming against the roof and turning the parking lot into a puddle of reflections from the neon open sign I'd just flipped off. I crumpled the prom photo into my jacket pocket, the edge digging into my palm like a reminder I couldn't shake. My beat-up 2008 Honda Civic sputtered to life, and I peeled out of the parking lot so fast I almost hit a stop sign. The radio was playing some old Taylor Swift song. One that used to be our song, back when we'd drive around Millfield with the windows down, singing off-key, and I slammed it off, jaw tight. 10 years, I'd spent 10 years trying to forget the sound of Ethan's laugh. The way he'd hold my hand when we walked through the woods behind the high school, the way he'd whisper "I love you" like it was a secret only we shared. And now he was back, with a scar and grey hair and a thanks that made my chest ache. I live in a tiny apartment above a laundromat on Main Street. The kind where you can hear the dryers thrum through the floor at 2 a.m. I climbed the creaky stairs, my hand on the pepper spray in my purse. Stupid, maybe. Since Ethan could have taken me down with one hand if he wanted to. But old habits die hard. When I turned the doorknob, the first thing I noticed was the window. It was open, even though I'd closed it that morning before work. The curtains billowed in the rain-wet wind, and my stomach dropped. I flipped on the light. My heart racing. There he was, sitting on my beat-up couch, his boots propped on the coffee table. A half-empty can of my cheap beer in his hand. He didn't look threatening, just tired, like he hadn't slept in days, but I still grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door, the one I'd bought after a guy tried to break in last year. Easy, Lila, he said, holding up his hands. I didn't break anything. Just wanted to talk, I shouted, gripping the bat so hard my knuckles turned white. You're an escaped convict. The cops are probably combing the town for you right now. And you're sitting on my couch drinking my beer. He set the can down slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. The cops aren't gonna find me. Not yet. I know how to hide in this town. Remember when we used to skip school and hide in the old mill? They never found us there, either. I did remember. We'd spent a whole afternoon there once, during senior year, eating peanut butter sandwiches and watching the clouds roll by. Ethan had drawn a heart on the wall with a marker, our initials inside it. I'd told him it was dumb, but I'd kissed him anyway. I dropped the bat, suddenly too tired to be angry. What do you want, Ethan? I asked, sinking into the armchair across from him. Why did you come back here? Why did you come to me? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and ran a hand through his grey-streaked hair. Because you're the only person in this world who might believe me, he said, the only person who ever really knew me. I laughed, sharp and bitter. I thought I knew you. I thought you were the guy who worked 2 jobs to pay for his mom's medical bills, the guy who cried at Disney movies, the guy who swore he'd never do anything to hurt me. Turns out you were the guy smuggling cocaine in the trunk of his truck. His jaw tightened. You don't think I had my reasons? Reasons don't make it okay. I stood up, pacing back and forth. Do you remember what you said to me that night? You said you were doing something big that would change everything for us. I thought you meant you got that promotion at the garage, not that you were dealing drugs. He stood up too, and for a second, I thought he was gonna yell at me, but instead, he just looked sad. My mom's cancer came back, he said quietly, stage 4, the insurance wouldn't cover it. The doctors said she had 6 months to live unless we could pay for this experimental treatment. $50,000 upfront. I didn't have a choice. Lila, I worked 2 jobs, 3 jobs. But I couldn't save that kind of money in time. Then Kane found me. Kane. The name sent a shiver down my spine. Kane Miller had been Ethan's best friend since childhood, the kind of guy who'd always been a little too rough around the edges, a little too willing to bend the rules. I'd never liked him, not really. But Ethan had always defended him, said he was just misunderstood. Kane got me into it, Ethan continued, said he had a connection who could get me the money fast. All I had to do was drive a few packages from Cleveland to Columbus. He swore it was low risk, that I'd never get caught. I told him no at first. You know I did, but then my mom had a seizure, and the doctors said if we didn't pay for the treatment soon, she'd be dead by Christmas. I caved. I did one run. Then another. It was easy money, too easy, and then you caught me. I froze. You knew I was the one who called the cops. He nodded. I knew, when the cops showed up. I saw your car parked down the street. I saw you watching from behind the bushes. I didn't say anything at the trial because I get it. You were scared. You thought I'd turned into someone else. The rain stopped suddenly, and the room went quiet except for the hum of the laundromat below. I pulled the crumpled photo out of my pocket and unfolded it, staring at our smiling faces. Why did you say thanks? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, before he could answer. The TV in the corner turned on, some late-night news broadcast. The anchor's voice cut through the silence. Authorities are still searching for 3 inmates who escaped from Mansfield Correctional Institution 2 nights ago. Among them is Ethan Voss, 32, who was serving a 10-year sentence for drug trafficking. Police warn that Voss is considered armed and dangerous. Ethan grabbed the remote and turned it off. Armed and dangerous, he muttered, shaking his head. I haven't touched a gun in 10 years. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I'm not here to hurt anyone, Lila. I'm here to find Kane. He set me up. He's the one who was really running the operation, and when the cops started closing in, he framed me. I spent 10 years in that hellhole because of him. And now I'm gonna make him pay. I stared at him, my mind racing. Could I believe him, after everything he'd done, after everything I'd been through? But looking into his eyes, those same eyes that had held so much love and hope all those years ago, I knew I wanted to believe that the boy I'd loved was still in there, somewhere. There was a knock at the door, sharp and loud. Ethan's eyes widened. That's not good, he said, moving toward the window. You need to tell them you haven't seen me. Say I came in, bought cigarettes, and left, nothing more. The knocking got louder. Ms. Carter, this is the Millfield Police Department. We'd like to ask you a few questions about Ethan Voss. Ethan climbed out the window, pausing to look back at me. I'll find you, he said, and I'll explain everything. I promise. Then he was gone, into the night. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. Standing in the doorway were Officer Greg Hale and a rookie I didn't recognize. Fresh-faced, with a crew cut and a badge that still looked shiny. Hale had been on the force since I was a kid. He'd pulled me over once for speeding when I was 17, then let me off with a warning after I reminded him I'd babysat his daughter, Mia. He looked at me now with that same paternal squint, like he could tell I was hiding something. Ms. Carter, thanks for letting us in, Hale said. Stepping past me into the apartment, his eyes scanned the room, lingering on the open window, the half-empty beer can on the coffee table, the baseball bat leaning against the door, and I felt my face heat up. The rookie stayed by the door, his hand resting on his gun holster like he was in some action movie. Can I get you guys some water? I asked, stalling for time. My hands were still shaking, and I knew Hale would notice. He noticed everything. No, thanks, Lila, we'll keep this quick, Hale said, sitting down on the couch. Ethan's couch. Just minutes ago, he pulled a notepad out of his pocket. We got a call from Joe's Minimart a little while ago. The security footage shows Ethan Voss was there tonight, bought a pack of cigarettes from you. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. Yeah, that's right. He came in around 11:45, asked for Marlboros. I asked for ID. He said he didn't have it, but I recognized him anyway, sold him the smokes. He left. That's all. Hale raised an eyebrow. He didn't say anything to you. No threats. No, weird comments. Weird comments. That was one way to put it, just the usual small talk. I lied, asked how the town had changed, said he was passing through. I didn't think much of it, until I saw the news later, scared the hell out of me. I forced a nervous laugh. Hoping it sounded convincing, the rookie spoke up then, his voice too loud. Ethan Voss is an escaped convict, he's dangerous. If he contacted you, you have a legal obligation to tell us. I glared at him. I just told you what happened. He came in, bought cigarettes, and left. I haven't seen him since high school before that. Do you really think I'd hide an escaped convict in my apartment? Look around. There's nowhere to hide. Unless you think he's in the dryer downstairs. Hale held up a hand to quiet the rookie. We're not accusing you of anything, Lila. We just need to cover all our bases. You and Ethan were close back in the day, prom dates, if I remember right. My throat tightened. Everyone in Millfield remembered. They remembered the golden boy and the girl next door, the prom photos in the local paper, the way Ethan had carried me across the stage at graduation when I twisted my ankle. And they remembered the night the cops showed up at his house, the way the headlines screamed local football star arrested for drug trafficking, the way I'd disappeared from town for 6 months after the trial. Too ashamed to face anyone. That was 10 years ago, I said, my voice flat. A lot changes, I know, Hale said, softening. I also know you were the one who called 911 that night. The rookie's head snapped up. You called it in. I nodded, staring at my shoes. I saw him loading duffel bags into his truck. I didn't know what was in them, but something felt off. I called the non-emergency line, told them there was suspicious activity. I didn't know it was drugs, not until the cops got there. It was a lie. I'd known exactly what was in those duffel bags. Ethan had told me, in a moment of panic, the night before. It's just one more run, he'd said, holding me tight. Then I'll have enough for Mom's treatment. I'll quit, I promise. We can go to college like we planned. Get out of Millfield. I'd believed him. Right up until I saw him loading the bags, his hands shaking, his face pale. Then I'd called 911. My finger hovering over the dial for 20 minutes before I worked up the nerve. Hale sighed. You did the right thing, Lila, back then and now. If Ethan contacts you again, calls, texts, shows up here, you call me immediately, day or night. He handed me a business card with his cell phone number on it. And lock your windows, it's not safe out there right now. I took the card and nodded. I will, thanks. Greg, after they left, I slammed the door and leaned against it. My legs giving out, I slid down to the floor, pulling the prom photo out of my pocket again. I flipped it over, staring at the word thanks scrawled in Ethan's handwriting. Thanks for what? For turning him in, for ruining his life, for making sure he spent 10 years in a cell while his mom died alone in a hospital bed, because that's what happened. Martha Voss passed away 6 months after Ethan went to prison. The experimental treatment not working even with the money he'd earned from the drug runs. I thought about the last time I saw her, a week before she died. I'd gone to the hospital, flowers in hand, too cowardly to go inside. I'd stood in the parking lot, watching her through the window, until Ethan's sister, Clara, came out and told me to leave. She doesn't want to see you, she'd said, her voice cold. None of us do. You ruined everything. I deserved that. I still did. I got up and closed the window, then locked it. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, something I kept for emergencies, and sat down on the couch. The beer can Ethan had drunk still on the coffee table. I picked it up, stared at the lip print he'd left on the edge, and set it back down. I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. He set me up. He's the one who was really running the operation. Could Kane have done that? Kane, who'd been Ethan's best friend since they were 5. Who'd been the best man at our hypothetical wedding. We'd planned it when we were 16, drunk on root beer floats. I grabbed my laptop off the coffee table and typed Kane Miller Millfield, Ohio into Google. The first result was a profile on the Millfield Chamber of Commerce website. There he was, smiling in a tailored suit, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. The headline read, Kane Miller named Millfield Businessman of the Year. Below that, a bio. Miller, 32, is the founder and CEO of Miller Construction, which has overseen the development of several key projects in downtown Millfield, including the new community center and the renovated movie theater. He is also a dedicated philanthropist, donating to local schools and hospitals. It made me sick. 10 years ago, Kane had been working at a gas station, stealing beer from the cooler and skipping out on his shifts. Now he was a philanthropist, a businessman of the year, and Ethan was the one in prison. There was a tap at the window. I jumped, spilling whiskey on my jeans. Outside, in the darkness, was Ethan. He was soaked from the rain, his hair sticking to his face, but he was smiling. I opened the window, my heart racing. "You're crazy," I whispered. "The cops were just here." "I know, I watched them leave," he said, climbing through the window. "You did good, stuck to the story." "Why did you come back?" I asked, closing the window behind him. "You could have gotten caught." He pulled off his wet jacket and dropped it on the floor. "Because you asked me a question, and I owe you an answer." He sat down on the couch, just like he had before, and patted the spot next to him. I hesitated, then sat down, keeping a safe distance between us. "You want to know why I said thanks?" he asked. I nodded. He took a deep breath, like he was preparing himself for a fight. "Because you saved my life, Lila, that night. When you called the cops, Kane was gonna kill me." My mouth fell open. "What are you talking about? The cops weren't the only ones coming for me that night," he said. His voice quiet. "Kane told me the connection was angry, said I'd messed up a run, that I owed them money. He said they were gonna come after me, after my mom, after you. He said the only way to keep us safe was to take the fall, plead guilty, do 10 years, and keep my mouth shut. He promised he'd take care of my mom, pay for her treatment, but I didn't believe him, not really. I was scared, and then you called the cops." He turned to look at me, his eyes glistening. "When those sirens started wailing, I knew I was safe. The cops took me away before Kane's guys could get to me. I spent 10 years in prison, but I was alive. My mom, well, we know how that turned out, but Kane didn't keep his promise to her either. He never paid a cent for her treatment, never even visited her in the hospital." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. It sounded like a lie, a story an escaped convict would tell to get sympathy. But Ethan had never been a good liar, not to me. I could see it in his eyes. He was telling the truth. "Why didn't you tell anyone this at the trial?" I asked. "Because Kane threatened you," he said, like it was obvious. He said if I opened my mouth, if I told anyone he was behind it, he'd hurt you, and I couldn't risk that. Not then, not ever." I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wiped it away, angry at myself for crying. "You should have told me," I said. "I couldn't," he said, reaching out to touch my hand. I pulled away, and he dropped his hand, looking hurt. "I thought if I kept you out of it, you'd be safe. I thought you'd move on, go to college, get married, have a life. Not this." He gestured around the apartment. And I felt my face heat up. "This is my life," I said, standing up, "and it's none of your business. You need to leave, Ethan, before the cops come back." He stood up too. "I'm not going anywhere until I take down Kane. And I need your help." "My help?" I laughed. "Why would I help you? You lied to me. You got involved with drugs. You let me think I ruined your life when you were just protecting me. Because you're the only one who can," he said. "You were there that night. You saw the bags. You heard me talk about Kane. You're the only person who can testify against him." I stared at him, my mind racing. Testify against Kane Miller, the most powerful man in Millfield. I'd be signing my own death warrant. But then I thought about Martha Voss, dying alone in the hospital. I thought about Ethan, spending 10 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. I thought about the boy I'd loved, the one who'd drawn a heart on the wall of the old mill with our initials. "I need time to think," I said. Finally, Ethan nodded. "I'll be back tomorrow night, same time. Don't tell anyone I was here, not even Hale." He moved toward the window, then paused. "Lila, what?" "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything." Then he climbed out the window, and I was alone again. I picked up the prom photo, flipped it over, and stared at the word thanks. This time, I didn't feel confused. I felt angry. Angry at Kane, angry at Ethan, angry at myself for ever getting tangled up in this. But most of all, I felt something else. Determination, because if Ethan was telling the truth, then Kane Miller was gonna pay, and I was gonna help him. The rain started again around 3 a.m., tapping against the window like a ghost's fingers. I hadn't slept a wink. I was still on the couch, the prom photo clutched in one hand, Hale's business card in the other. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, the 22-year-old version, scared and desperate, loading duffel bags into his beat-up pickup truck. The 32-year-old version, scarred and grey, telling me he'd lied to protect me. Both versions haunted me. I grabbed my laptop off the coffee table and pulled up the old Millfield Gazette archives. The headline from October 17, 2015, stared back at me. Local hero turns to crime. Ethan Voss arrested on drug charges. There was a photo of him being led away in handcuffs, his head down, his shoulders hunched. I was in the background, behind a bush, my face hidden. Back then, I'd been proud of that. Proud no one could see the girl who'd betrayed her first love. Now, it just made me sick. I clicked on the article, skimming through the details I already knew by heart. Voss, a former Millfield High School football star, was arrested late Tuesday night after a concerned citizen reported suspicious activity at his residence. Police found over 500 grams of cocaine in his truck, with an estimated street value of $50,000. Voss, who was set to attend Ohio State University on a football scholarship, told police he acted alone. Acted alone, that's what Kane had wanted him to say, that's what he'd threatened him into saying. I thought about the night before the arrest, the way Ethan had shown up at my house, soaking wet from the rain. His hands shaking. I'd let him in, made him a cup of hot chocolate, and listened as he rambled about his mom's cancer, about the money he needed, about his friend who had a solution. It's just one run, Lila, he'd said, sitting on my bed, staring at his hands. From Cleveland to Columbus, I drop off the package, pick up the money, and that's it. Then I can pay for Mom's treatment, then we can go to college, just like we planned. I'll never do it again, I swear. I'd believed him. How could I not? He was Ethan, my Ethan, the boy who'd carried my books home when I sprained my ankle, who'd stayed up all night with me when my grandma died, who'd written "I love you" in chalk on my driveway on my 16th birthday. I'd hugged him, kissed him, told him I loved him. I'd told him to be careful. I'd never imagined he was already in over his head. The next night, the rain was worse. I'd been at work at the diner, same one we'd worked at together during high school, when I'd gotten a text from Ethan, "Need to talk, urgent." I'd left early, telling my boss I was sick, and driven to his house. That's when I saw it. His truck parked in the driveway, the tailgate down. He was loading duffel bags into the bed, his face pale, his movements jerky. There was a man standing next to him, a man I didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a tattoo of a snake on his neck. When he looked at me, his eyes were cold. "Empty, Lila, what are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. He stepped in front of the duffel bags, like he was trying to hide them. "You texted me," I said, my voice shaking. "Who is this?" The man laughed, a low, gravelly sound. "This your girl, Voss?" he asked. "Cute, real cute. Get in the house, Lila," Ethan said, his eyes pleading. "Please, I'll explain later." "Explain what?" I shouted. "Explain why you're loading duffel bags into your truck with a guy who looks like he's in the mob. Explain why you smell like gasoline and fear. Explain why you're throwing away our future for this." The man stepped forward, and Ethan put his arm out to stop him. "That's enough, Jake," he said. "She doesn't know anything. I'll meet you at the drop point." Jake stared at me for a long time, like he was memorizing my face. "Be there in an hour," he said, before walking to a black SUV parked across the street. He got in, and the car peeled away. Ethan turned to me, his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to see that. I didn't want you to get involved." "Get involved in what?" I asked, stepping closer to him. I looked at the duffel bags, at the way they were bulging, at the faint smell of something chemical. "Ethan, what's in those bags?" He didn't answer. He just hugged me, tight, like he was never gonna let go. "I love you," he said, whispering in my ear. "No matter what happens, I love you." That's when I knew what was in those bags. I knew he wasn't just doing one run. I knew he was in trouble. Deep, dangerous trouble. I pulled away from him, my heart breaking. "I can't do this, Ethan," I said. "I can't watch you throw your life away. I can't be part of this." "I have no choice," he said, his eyes glistening. "Mom's dying. Lila, what would you do? Let her die." "I can't do that. I can't." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I just got in my car and drove away. I drove around town for hours, the rain pounding against the windshield, my mind racing. I thought about Martha, about how kind she'd been to me, about how she'd always treated me like her own daughter. I thought about Ethan, about his football scholarship, about our plans to move to Columbus, about our future. I thought about the man with the snake tattoo, about the way he'd looked at me, about the danger Ethan was in. At 11 p.m. I pulled into a parking lot across from the police station. I sat there for 20 minutes, my finger hovering over the dial on my phone. I thought about calling Ethan, begging him to stop. I thought about calling Clara, telling her what her brother was doing. I thought about driving back to his house, grabbing him by the arm, and dragging him away. But then I thought about the man with the snake tattoo. I thought about what he might do to Ethan if he messed up. I thought about what he might do to me. I dialed the non-emergency line. A dispatcher answered. Her voice bored. Millfield Police Department. How can I help you? I want to report suspicious activity, I said, my voice shaking. At 123 Oak Street, a man is loading duffel bags into a truck, I think. I think there's drugs in them. What's your name? She asked. I don't want to give my name, I said. I'm scared. We can keep your identity anonymous. Just tell us what you saw. I told her everything. About the truck, about the duffel bags, about the man with the snake tattoo. I didn't mention Ethan's name. I didn't have to. She knew who lived at 123 Oak Street. Everyone in Millfield did. I hung up the phone and drove to a park on the edge of town. I sat there, watching the police cars race toward Ethan's house, their sirens wailing. I saw the lights flash, saw the officers jump out of their cars, saw Ethan put his hands up. I saw him look around. Saw his eyes land on my car, parked in the distance. I saw the confusion on his face, the way he shook his head like he couldn't believe it. I didn't stay to see him get arrested. I just drove away, crying so hard I could barely see the road. The next morning, I saw the headlines. I saw the photo of Ethan in handcuffs. I heard the rumors about the cocaine, about the street value, about his confession that he'd acted alone. I didn't go to the trial. I couldn't. I left town the day it started. Moving to Columbus to live with my aunt, I got a job at a coffee shop, changed my phone number, avoided social media. I tried to forget, but I never could. A knock at the door pulled me out of my memories. I jumped, looking at the clock. It was 7 a.m. Who would be at my door this early? I grabbed the baseball bat again, creeping toward the door. I looked through the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was Clara Voss, Ethan's sister. She was standing on the porch, her arms crossed, her face cold. I opened the door, my hands shaking. Clara, I said, my voice barely a whisper. What are you doing here? I know he's here, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. She looked around, her eyes scanning the room, lingering on the beer can on the coffee table, on the wet jacket on the floor, on the prom photo in my hand. I know Ethan's back. I saw the news about the breakout. I knew he'd come to you. I closed the door, my throat tight. He was here, I said, finally, but he's gone now. He left a few hours ago. Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course he did. He's always using you, Lila, always has been. First, he uses you to feel good about himself, then he uses you to cover up his crimes, and now he's using you to get revenge on Kane. When are you gonna learn? It's not like that, I said. He's innocent, Clara. Kane set him up. He threatened him. Threatened me. Ethan went to prison to protect us. Clara's face softened, just for a second, then it hardened again. Innocent. Ethan's not innocent. He made his choice. Lila, he chose to sell drugs. He chose to lie to all of us. He chose to leave Mom to die alone. And you chose to call the cops. You chose to ruin his life. Don't act like you're some victim here. I did it to save him, I said, crying now. I thought if I called the cops, they'd help him. I thought they'd get him out of whatever he was in. I didn't know it would end like this. Clara stared at me, her eyes glistening. Mom knew, she said, quietly. Before she died, she told me. She knew Ethan was selling drugs. She knew why. She also knew you called the cops. She didn't blame you, Lila. She said you were just a kid, scared and confused. But I blamed you for years. I hated you. I'm sorry. I whispered. I'm so sorry about your mom. I wanted to visit her, but I was too scared, too ashamed. She would have wanted to see you, Clara said. She sat down on the couch, picking up the prom photo. She stared at it, a small smile playing on her lips. We all thought you two would get married. Mom even bought a dress for the wedding. It's still in her closet, in a box. I sat down next to her, the tears still flowing. I loved him, Clara. I still do, I know, she said, handing me the photo. That's why I'm here. I heard Kane's been asking about Ethan, asking about you. He's scared, Lila, scared Ethan's gonna expose him, and when Kane's scared, he gets dangerous. I came to warn you. Stay away from Ethan, stay away from Kane. This isn't your fight anymore, it is my fight, I said, looking at her. I started it 10 years ago, when I called the cops. Now I need to finish it. I need to help Ethan clear his name. Clara shook her head. You'll get yourself killed. Kane has people everywhere. He owns this town. Then we'll take him down together, I said. You know things I don't. You knew Ethan back then, knew Kane. You can help us. Clara stared at me for a long time. Then she sighed, pulling a piece of paper out of her purse. This is the address of the old warehouse where Kane used to store the drugs, she said, handing it to me. Ethan doesn't know I have it. I found it in Mom's attic last year, in a box of Ethan's old things. There might be evidence there, receipts, ledgers, something. But be careful, Kane still owns it. He uses it for storage now, for his construction company. But there are cameras, guards. I took the paper, my hands shaking. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, she said, standing up. If you get caught, I don't know you, and if Ethan gets caught, tell him I said. I said I'm proud of him, for trying to make things right. She paused, then hugged me. It was a short, stiff hug, but it was more than I'd gotten from her in 10 years. Be careful, Lila. After she left, I stared at the address on the paper, for 56 Industrial Drive. I knew where that was, on the edge of town, near the railroad tracks. I'd driven past it a million times, never knowing what secrets it held. I thought about Ethan, about Clara, about Martha. I thought about the boy who'd drawn a heart on the wall of the old mill, about the man who'd come back to me after 10 years, asking for my help. I thought about the thanks on the back of the prom photo. I picked up Hale's business card, stared at it for a minute, then threw it in the trash. I wasn't gonna call him. I wasn't gonna turn Ethan in. I was gonna help him. I was gonna make things right. Starting with the warehouse. The sun came up weak and gray, filtering through the curtains and casting streaks across the coffee table where the warehouse address lay. I'd folded it into a tiny square, tucked it between the pages of an old cookbook, something Clara would never think to check if she came back. My hands still smelled like the whiskey I'd spilled the night before, and my head throbbed. But I couldn't bring myself to make coffee. I just sat on the couch, staring at the window, waiting for night to come. Work was a blur. I showed up at Joe's Minimart at 3 p.m., my eyes red-rimmed, my mind elsewhere. Joe, the owner, a portly guy with a white beard and a permanent scowl, gave me a look. You sick, Lila? He asked, wiping his hands on his apron. You look like hell. Just tired. I lied. Didn't sleep well, he grunted. Take a break in an hour, get yourself a soda or something, and for God's sake, stop staring at the door like it's gonna bite you. I nodded, but I couldn't help it. Every time the bell jingled, my heart skipped a beat. I half expected Hale to walk in, his notepad in hand, ready to arrest me for harboring an escaped convict, or worse. Kane, with his tailored suits and fake smile, acting like he was just stopping by for a pack of gum, while his guys waited outside to drag me into an alley. The break couldn't come fast enough. I went to the back room, grabbed a Coke from the fridge, and pulled out my phone. I typed 456 Industrial Drive Millfield into Google Maps. The warehouse popped up, a grey, windowless building surrounded by a chain-link fence, with a parking lot that looked like it hadn't been paved since the 90s. The street view showed a sign out front, Miller Construction Storage. Kane's name was emblazoned across it in big, bold letters. I scrolled through the reviews. Most of them were from local businesses complaining about late deliveries or damaged equipment. But one review, from 3 years ago, caught my eye. Avoid this place. Saw some shady guys loading stuff into a van at 2 a.m., called the cops, but they never showed up. Figures. Kane Miller owns half the town. My stomach dropped. Shady guys, late nights, it matched Ethan's story. I deleted the search history, stuffed the phone back in my pocket, and went back to work. The rest of the shift passed in slow motion. A kid stole a lollipop. A woman argued with me about the price of milk. A truck driver, same one from the night before, winked at me and said, "You look better when you're not about to cry, sweetheart." I closed up at 11 p.m., my hands shaking as I counted the register. The bell jingled one last time, and I froze, but it wasn't Hale, it wasn't Kane, it was Ethan. He was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a hoodie pulled low over his head, his hands in his pockets. He looked even more tired than I felt, but his eyes were alert, scanning the parking lot behind him. "Follow me," he said, turning and walking toward the back of the store. "We can't talk here." I grabbed my purse and locked the door, jogging to catch up. He led me to a narrow alley between the minimart and the laundromat next door, where dumpsters reeked of rotting food and cigarette butts littered the ground. He pressed me against the brick wall, his body shielding me from the street, and kissed me. It was quick, rough, and unexpected, like he was making sure I was real. When he pulled away, his eyes were dark. "Did anyone follow you?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, Joe's the only one here, and he left an hour ago." "What's going on? Why are we meeting here?" "Because your apartment's probably bugged," he said, his voice low. "Kane's guys have been watching it since last night. I saw them. Black SUV, tinted windows, parked across the street." Ice flooded my veins. "How do you know it's Kane's guys?" "Because I know his style," he said, leaning against the wall next to me. "He doesn't do his own dirty work. He hires guys like Jake, guys with tattoos and nothing to lose. They sit and watch, they wait, and when the time's right, they strike." I pulled the warehouse address out of my purse, unfolding it. "Clara gave me this," I said, handing it to him. "Said it's where Kane stored the drugs, said there might be evidence there, receipts, ledgers. She said it's guarded, though, cameras, guards." Ethan took the paper, his fingers brushing mine. He stared at the address for a long time, his jaw tight. "I know this place," he said, finally. "I helped Kane fix the roof there once, back when we were 18. He said it was his side project, never told me what he used it for." "Stupid, stupid," I repeated. "You were 18. He was your best friend. Best friend doesn't set you up for a 10-year stretch," he said, crumpling the paper in his hand. "Best friend doesn't let your mom die alone. Best friend doesn't threaten the girl you love." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I need to tell you about prison, Lila, about why I escaped, because it's not just about Kane, it's about survival." I nodded, leaning in closer. The alley was quiet except for the hum of a distant streetlight and the rustle of a rat in the dumpster. I could smell his cologne, same one he'd worn in high school, cheap and citrusy, and it made my chest ache. "Mansfield Correctional is a hellhole," he said, staring at his hands. "You go in there, and you either become a monster or you die." I tried to keep my head down. I worked in the library, kept to myself, but then I met a guy, Tyler. He was in for armed robbery, said he used to work for Kane. Back in the day, he told me things I didn't want to hear. Like what? Like Kane didn't just frame me, he paid off the guards, paid off the judge, made sure I got the maximum sentence. He wanted me gone, out of sight, out of mind, because if I ever got out, I'd come after him, and he was right. He laughed, bitter. Tyler said Kane's empire started with that drug operation. Started with the money he stole from me, from the runs I did for him. He used that money to start Miller Construction, used it to buy off the cops, the mayor, the whole damn town. My mouth fell open. "He used your money to become a philanthropist." "That's the best part," he said, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "He donates to the hospital where my mom died, donates to the high school where we played football. Everyone loves him. They call him a pillar of the community." "What happened to Tyler?" I asked. His face darkened. "He turned up dead in his cell 2 weeks ago. Hanged himself, they said, but I saw him the night before. He was scared, said Kane's guys had visited him, told him to keep his mouth shut. I knew they killed him. And I knew I was next." I reached out, touching his arm. His skin was cold. "So you escaped," I said, quietly. He nodded, Me and 2 other guys, we'd been planning it for months. Tyler gave me a map, said there was a drainage pipe that led out of the prison, under the fence. The guards never checked it, not since the 80s. We waited for a storm, same as last night, pouring rain, wind howling. The cameras shorted out, the guards were huddled in their booths, drinking coffee. We slipped out through the pipe, crawled through mud and sewage for 2 miles, and then we split up. The other 2 went to Cleveland. I came here. Why here? I asked. Why not go somewhere else? Start over. He looked at me, his eyes glistening. Because I had to come back for you, because I had to make sure you were okay. Because I had to take down Kane. For me, for my mom, for you. He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. I know it's selfish, I know I'm putting you in danger. But I can't do this alone, Lila. I need you. I stared at him, my mind racing. He was an escaped convict, a fugitive. If we got caught, I'd go to prison too, but if we didn't do something, Kane would keep getting away with it. Tyler would have died for nothing. Ethan would have spent 10 years in hell for nothing. We need to check out the warehouse, I said. Finally, Clara said there might be evidence there, receipts, ledgers, something that proves Kane was running the operation. Ethan shook his head. It's too risky. Cameras everywhere, guards at the gate. We'd get caught before we even got inside. Not if we go at night, I said. After midnight, the guards will be tired. The cameras, maybe we can disable them. How do you plan on disabling them? He asked, raising an eyebrow. You gonna climb up there and cut the wires? You've never even changed a light bulb without calling me. I laughed, despite myself. I know a guy, I said, Jesse. He works at the electronics store on Main Street. He owes me a favor. Helped him pass his GED a few years ago. He can get us a signal jammer, something to take out the cameras for a few minutes. Ethan stared at me, surprised. Since when do you have connections? Since I've been living in this town alone for 10 years, I said, shrugging. You learn to make friends, even the useful ones. He smiled, a real smile. First one I'd seen in 10 years, it made him look like the boy I'd loved. The one who'd drawn a heart on the mill wall. Okay, he said, we'll do it. Tomorrow night, midnight, meet me here, same spot, bring the jammer, and wear something dark. I nodded. What about the guards? I'll handle them, he said, his voice hardening. I've got a plan. Before I could ask what the plan was, a car horn honked down the street. Ethan's head snapped up, his hand going to his waist, like he was reaching for a weapon. But there was nothing there. We need to go, he said. Pulling away from me. That's probably Kane's guys. They're circling the block. Wait, I said, grabbing his arm. When will I see you again? Tomorrow night, he said, kissing me quickly. Midnight. Don't be late. And Lila. What? Be careful, he said. If anything happens to you, I don't know what I'd do. He turned and ran down the alley, his hoodie flapping in the wind. I watched him go, my heart pounding, until he disappeared around the corner. Then I walked to my car, unlocked it, and climbed in. I sat there for a minute, staring at the steering wheel, before I noticed it. A note tucked under the windshield wiper. I unfolded it, my hands shaking. It was written in messy, block letters. Stay away from Voss. His bad news, for you, too. No signature. But I knew who it was from. Kane. He was watching me. He knew I was helping Ethan, and he was warning me. But it didn't scare me. It made me angry. Angry enough to do whatever it took to take him down. I crumpled the note and threw it in the glove compartment. Then I started the car and drove home, already planning for tomorrow night, the warehouse, the evidence, the end of Kane Miller, and maybe, just maybe, the start of something new with Ethan. If we survived. Jesse was closing up his electronics shop when I arrived. The neon open sign flickering like a dying candle. He was a scrawny guy with glasses held together by tape and a tattoo of a circuit board on his wrist. Someone who'd been bullied as bad as I had in high school, which is how we'd become casual allies. When I told him what I needed, he nearly dropped the box of phone chargers he was carrying. A signal jammer, he whispered, glancing over his shoulder like Kane was hiding behind the display cases. Lila, those are illegal, like, felony illegal, and if this is about that escaped convict. It's about getting the truth out, I said, leaning across the counter. Remember when you couldn't pass your math GED? I stayed up 3 nights with you. going over algebra until your eyes crossed. I never asked for anything in return, but I'm asking now." He bit his lip, staring at the floor. Finally, he nodded, disappearing into the back room. He came out 5 minutes later with a small black box, wires sticking out of the top like a Frankenstein's monster. "It works for 10 minutes max," he said, shoving it into my hands. "After that, it overheats, and if anyone asks, you never saw me." "Got it." I squeezed his hand. "Got it, thank you, Jesse. Just be careful," he said, his voice cracking. "Kane's guys came in here last week, asking about you. Said you'd been asking questions about his warehouse." I told 'em I didn't know nothing, but they didn't look convinced. I settled in my gut. They were already tracking my moves. I stuffed the jammer into my backpack and hurried out. The night air sharp against my cheeks. By the time I got home, my hands were so cold I could barely hold my keys. I changed into black jeans and a hoodie, stuffed a flashlight and a pocket knife into my bag, and waited. The clock ticked slow, each second stretching into an hour, until finally, it hit 11:50 p.m. I grabbed my backpack and slipped out the back door of the laundromat, avoiding the street where Kane's SUV had been parked the night before. Ethan was already in the alley, leaning against a dumpster, a crowbar tucked into his waistband. He was wearing all black too, his face half covered by a bandana, and he'd traded his hoodie for a leather jacket that looked like it had seen better days. When he saw me, he pushed off the wall, his eyes scanning my backpack. "Got it?" he asked. I held up the jammer. 10 minutes, that's all we have." He nodded, pulling a pair of gloves out of his pocket and handing them to me. "Put these on, no fingerprints." He led me to a beat-up motorcycle parked behind the diner, something he must have stolen, since he'd never owned one before, and handed me a helmet. "Hold on tight." The ride to the warehouse was silent, the wind screaming in my ears. We took back roads, weaving through empty streets and fields, until the warehouse loomed ahead, dark, massive, and utterly desolate. Ethan parked the bike behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, killing the engine. The only sound was the distant rumble of a train and the wind whistling through the chain-link fence. "Stay behind me," he whispered, pulling the crowbar out of his waistband. He crept toward the fence, I following close, and pointed to a section near the corner where the metal was bent, like someone had cut it before and welded it back together poorly. "That's our in. Guards do a patrol every 15 minutes. We just passed their last check." He jammed the crowbar into the gap, prying the fence open just enough for us to squeeze through. My jacket caught on the sharp metal, tearing a hole in the sleeve, but I didn't dare make a sound. Inside the fence, the warehouse loomed even larger, its windows black as oil. Cameras mounted on the roof rotated slowly, their red lights blinking like demonic eyes. "Now," Ethan said. I pulled out the jammer and flipped the switch. It buzzed softly, and the red lights on the cameras went out. Success! We sprinted toward the warehouse, our boots crunching on gravel, and ducked behind a stack of lumber, Kane's construction supplies. No doubt, Ethan pulled a lockpick set out of his pocket, something he must have picked up in prison, and approached the side door. His hands were steady as he worked the lock, the only sound the faint click of metal on metal. The door creaked open, and we slipped inside. The warehouse was pitch black, the air thick with dust and the smell of motor oil. I flipped on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal rows of shelves stacked with construction materials, drywall, nails, paint cans. But in the back corner, there was a metal door with a padlock, unlike the rest of the storage areas. "That's it," Ethan whispered. "Kane's hiding something in there." We moved toward it, our steps silent on the concrete floor. Just as Ethan reached for the padlock, a voice boomed through the darkness. "Who's there?" I froze, my blood turning to ice. A guard stood at the front of the warehouse, a flashlight in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other. His beam the shelves, inching closer to us. Ethan grabbed my arm, pulling me behind a stack of drywall, and mouthed, "Stay here." He crept around the shelves, moving like a shadow, and when the guard's back was turned, he lunged. There was a muffled thud, and the guard crumpled to the floor, his walkie-talkie clattering to the ground. Ethan stood over him, his chest heaving, and shook his head when I started to speak. "He's just knocked out," he said. tying the guard's hands with a zip tie he pulled from his pocket. "Hurry, we've got 5 minutes left on the jammer," I nodded. My hands trembling as I shone the flashlight on the padlock, Ethan jammed the crowbar under the hasp, grunting with effort, and with a sharp snap, the lock broke free. He pushed the metal door open, and we stepped into a small room hidden behind the shelves. Kane's secret storage, just like Clara had said. The air smelled like old paper and mildew, and my flashlight beam danced over stacks of cardboard boxes and metal filing cabinets. "Check the cabinets," Ethan said. Yanking open a box labeled construction permits. Inside were piles of fake receipts, all made out to shell companies I'd never heard of. "These are for laundering money," he muttered, shoving the receipts into his pocket. "But we need something that ties him to the drugs." I pulled open the top drawer of a filing cabinet. My fingers brushing against a leather-bound ledger, I pulled it out, flipping through the pages. Names, dates, amounts, all scrawled in Kane's messy handwriting. "Ethan." "Look," I said, holding it up. "This is it, every drug run, every drop point, every payment to the cops. Look at this." He paid Hale $10,000 to keep quiet about the arrest. Ethan's jaw tightened as he scanned the page. "That son of a bitch," he said. "I knew Hale was dirty. He always acted too friendly, too eager to brush things under the rug." He grabbed the ledger, tucking it under his arm, and closed the drawer. "We need to go, now, the jammer's gonna die any second." Just as he spoke, the cameras outside started beeping, their red lights flickering back to life. The walkie-talkie on the floor crackled to life, a gruff voice shouting, "Mike, you there? Camera 3 just came back online. Report in." Ethan swore, grabbing my arm. "We have to run," he said. We sprinted toward the side door. But before we could reach it, the main door of the warehouse slammed open, light flooded in, and Kane stood there, flanked by 2 men. Jake, the guy with the snake tattoo, and another brute with a scar across his cheek. Kane was wearing a tailored suit, just like in his Chamber of Commerce photo, but his smile was gone, replaced by a cold, murderous glare. "Thought you'd come here, Voss," he said, his voice calm but deadly. "Should have known you couldn't stay away from the scene of the crime." Ethan pushed me behind him, gripping the crowbar tight. "It's over, Kane," he said. "We have the ledger. Everyone's gonna know what you did, how you framed me, how you paid off the cops, how you built your little empire on blood and drugs." Kane laughed, a loud, booming sound that echoed through the warehouse. "You think anyone's gonna believe an escaped convict and his lapdog?" he said, nodding at me. "The ledger's just a bunch of scribbles, no one'll take it seriously. But you're gonna disappear, again, this time, for good." Jake stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Come on, Voss, let's finish what we started 10 years ago, you and me." No witnesses. Ethan charged forward, swinging the crowbar at Jake's head. Jake ducked, grabbing Ethan's arm and slamming him against the wall. The crowbar clattered to the floor, and they grappled, punches flying. The other guy lunged at me, and I grabbed the first thing I could reach, a can of paint thinner, and sprayed it in his eyes. He screamed, clutching his face, and I ran, ducking behind a stack of lumber. "Lila, get out of here," Ethan shouted, shoving Jake off him. He grabbed the crowbar off the floor, swinging it at Kane, who stepped back just in time. "Take the ledger to the Gazette, give it to Linda, she'll print it." I looked at the ledger in my hand, then at Ethan, who was fighting off both Jake and the other guy. I couldn't leave him, but if I stayed, we'd both die. "I'm not leaving you," I shouted, grabbing a 2x4 off the shelf and running back into the fight. I swung it at Jake's back, and he stumbled, giving Ethan the chance to land a punch to his jaw. Jake fell to the floor, unconscious. The other guy recovered, grabbing me by the hair and slamming my head against the wall. Stars exploded in my vision, and the ledger slipped from my hand. Kane picked it up, grinning. "Nice try, sweetheart," he said. "But this is mine now," Ethan roared, tackling the guy to the ground and punching him until he stopped moving. He turned to Kane, his face blooded, his eyes wild. "Give it back," he said, stepping closer. Kane backed away, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a gun. My heart stopped. "Stay back, Voss," he said, pointing it at Ethan's chest. "One more step, and I shoot, then I shoot her." then I burn this place to the ground. No ledger, no witnesses, no problem. Ethan froze, his hands raised. You don't have to do this, Kane, he said. We can fix this. Turn yourself in. Tell the truth. Fix this. Kane laughed. There's no fixing this. I'm a businessman of the year, remember? I don't go to prison. You do. He raised the gun, his finger on the trigger. Goodbye, Ethan. A gunshot rang out. I screamed, closing my eyes. When I opened them, Kane was on the floor, clutching his shoulder, the gun clattering away. Officer Hale stood in the doorway, his gun raised. The rookie behind him. Freeze, Hale shouted. Put your hands up, Kane cursed, reaching for the gun. But Hale shot him in the leg. He cried out, falling back. The rookie ran forward, cuffing him, while Hale turned to Ethan and me. His eyes softened when he saw us, blooded and bruised. I'm sorry, Lila, he said. I should have believed you. When you threw my card away, I knew something was wrong. I followed you here, saw everything. He nodded at the ledger, which had fallen to the floor. That's gonna put a lot of people in jail, including me, if I'm smart. Ethan stared at him, surprised. You're gonna turn yourself in. Hale sighed. I have to. My daughter deserves better than a dirty cop for a dad, and you deserve justice. He holstered his gun. The DA's gonna want to talk to you, but with that ledger, and my testimony, we can get your conviction overturned. You're gonna be free, Ethan. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Paramedics rushed in, tending to Kane and the unconscious guards. Hale led Ethan and me outside, where the night air was fresh and cool. A news van pulled up, its lights flashing. And Linda from the Gazette jumped out, her camera in hand. Ethan Voss, she said, approaching us. Can I get a statement? Ethan looked at me, smiling. The first real smile I'd seen in 10 years. Yeah, he said, you can tell the whole story, from the beginning. As he spoke, I stood beside him, watching the sunrise over the warehouse. The rain had stopped, and the sky was pink and gold. For the first time in a decade, I didn't feel like I was looking over my shoulder. I felt free. And when Ethan took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine, I knew that no matter what happened next, we'd face it together. The days after the warehouse felt like a whirlwind. The Millfield Gazette ran Linda's story on the front page. Businessman of the Year exposed, Kane Miller's drug empire uncovered. The ledger and Hale's testimony were damning. Names of cops, judges, even town council members who'd taken bribes spilled out, turning Millfield upside down. People lined up at the police station to give statements, and the DA's office worked around the clock to build cases against everyone involved. Ethan was held in the county jail, but it was nothing like Mansfield. Hale made sure of that. He got Ethan a private cell, 3 meals a day, and visits whenever I wanted. The first time I saw him behind the glass, he looked lighter, like a 10-year weight had been lifted off his shoulders. They're gonna drop the escape charges, he said, grinning. Said it was justifiable given the circumstances. Can you believe that? I laughed, wiping away a tear. I can believe it. You're gonna be free, Ethan, really free. Clara came with me to the hearing 2 weeks later. She sat between us in the courtroom, her hand clasped tightly in mine, when the judge read the verdict. Case dismissed. All charges against Ethan Voss are hereby dropped. The room erupted in applause. Clara cried. Ethan hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. And even Hale wiped a tear from his eye as he walked over to shake Ethan's hand. Welcome back, kid, Hale said. Mia's gonna be thrilled. She always said you were her favorite babysitter. The first thing Ethan wanted to do was visit his mom's grave. We drove out to the cemetery on the edge of town. The same one where we'd buried her 10 years ago. The headstone was small, simple. Martha Voss, 1960 to 2015. Beloved mother, but someone had planted roses around it, pink ones, her favorite. Clara knelt down, brushing dirt off the stone, and smiled. I come every week, she said. Told her you'd come home someday. She always believed me. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand resting on the stone. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry I let him do this to us. But it's over now. I'm home. We stayed there for an hour, talking about her, about the way she'd sing off-key in the kitchen, about how she'd always make extra cookies for us when we were kids. About the time she'd caught us kissing in the basement and just laughed and handed us a plate of brownies. It was the first time we'd talked about her without crying, without guilt. It felt like she was there with us, in the warm sun and the scent of roses. Kane got 25 years in prison, no parole. Most of his associates took plea deals, but Hale chose to stand trial. He got 5 years, but with good behavior, he'd be out in 3. Mia's gonna visit every weekend, he told us before he left. Said she's gonna teach me how to use a smartphone when I get out. Says I'm too old-fashioned. Life slowly returned to normal, but it was a new normal. Better. Ethan got a job at the garage downtown, the same one where he'd worked in high school. The owner, Mr. Thompson, hired him on the spot. Always knew you were a good kid, he said. Knew Kane was trouble from day one. I quit my job at Joe's Minimart and got a job at the library, the same one where Ethan had worked in prison. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, remembered him from the letters he'd written her. He'd volunteered to read to kids over the phone during his sentence. Best reader we ever had, she said. The kids still ask about Mr. Ethan. One night, a month after Ethan got out, we drove out to the old mill. It was just like we remembered, abandoned, overgrown with vines, but the heart Ethan had drawn on the wall was still there, faint but visible. He took my hand, leading me inside, and smiled. Remember this place? He asked. We spent our whole senior year here. I laughed. I remember you tried to cook a hot dog over a candle and almost set the place on fire. I remember you wrote me that poem on a napkin. I remember you told me you loved me here for the first time. He pulled me close, his arms around my waist. I still love you, he said, more than ever. I know I messed up, I know I left you, but I'm never gonna leave you again, Lila, I promise. I kissed him, slow and soft. The way we used to kiss when we were kids, when the world felt like it was ours for the taking. Outside, the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, a train rumbled by, and a bird sang in the trees. It was quiet, peaceful, perfect. I love you too, I said, resting my head on his chest. Always have, always will. He pulled out a small box from his pocket, and my heart stopped. It was the same box he'd given me for my 18th birthday. The one with the silver necklace, our initials, E and L, tangled together. I'd lost it when I moved to Columbus, but he'd found it in his mom's attic, tucked away in a box of our old things. I've had this since the day I got out, he said, opening the box, waited for the right moment to give it back. He took the necklace out, clasping it around my neck. It's always been yours, just like I have. We stayed at the mill until dark, talking about the future, about how we'd save up for a house, about how we wanted to have kids someday, about how we'd never take each other for granted again. When we finally left, Ethan held my hand as we walked to the car, and I didn't feel like I was looking over my shoulder anymore. I didn't feel guilty, or scared, or lost. I felt home. A few months later, Joe's Minimart closed down. They tore it down and built a park there, with a playground and a picnic area. On the opening day, Clara brought a cake. Hale came with Mia, who tackled Ethan to the ground and demanded he push her on the swing, and even Jessie showed up, wearing a new pair of glasses that didn't have tape on them. Ethan and I sat on a bench, watching Mia swing, and he took my hand. You know what's funny, he said, 10 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never see you again, never get to apologize, never get to be happy. But here we are. I leaned my head on his shoulder, smiling. Here we are, I repeated. The sun was shining, the kids were laughing, and the necklace around my neck felt warm against my skin. It was a new beginning, a second chance, and this time, we weren't gonna waste it. Alright, that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We'll keep updating with more exciting stories, and we look forward to seeing you next time.